Is China now taking the lead on the future of the world? By the end of this video, I'll give you some context and some reasons that I think that you should be paying attention to China and their vision for the future. Recently, China held a massive military parade, the last couple of days. It was to commemorate the 80th anniversary of World War II, the end of World War II. Now, with this military parade and meeting, you also had many other leaders from countries that are run similar to China's, which is the authoritarian style. Authoritarian style of leadership is where most of the power is centered on just a small group or on one person. So as can be imagined, you had leaders from Russia, North Korea, and even Iran was in attendance. These leaders clearly sent a message to the world. There was one video that's circulating which shows a lot of the leaders walking with China in the middle, the Chinese Premier Xi in the middle, flanked by Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin. This sent a clear message to the world that they are reshaping the world order and that we should be paying attention. China for a long time has been evolving and developing very quietly, while we in America have been focused on greed and profits and making new weaponry. China has been evolving as a country in a lot of different areas, not just in military, also in technology, also in medicine and in sciences. China has taken the lead in a lot of these areas, and it has the U.S. very concerned. I recall being in a private meeting with the former commandant of the U.S. Marine Corps. And this meeting was attended by folks who are there to serve veterans in a capacity. I never forget the words spoken by the former Marine Commandant when he said they are extremely concerned about China. China has evolved more rapidly than they could ever imagine. And they believe that China could even be more advanced than the U.S. and have a much stronger military than the U.S. This is not a game. What they're showing you on TV from China, from this massive military parade, they're showing you what they have in comparison to what the U.S. has always said they've had. They put on display all their missile systems, weapons, robots, all technology that the U.S. suspected they had, but China is putting on full display and said, yes, we have it. Even underwater drones that travel at unbelievable speeds. China letting America know that they're no longer the superpower, that they have a contender, that they have someone that they can truly compete with. As I mentioned, the Chinese for a long time has had an ideology of being just the world leader, and they bet everything on that. They've even changed the way that they've run the government. Some years ago, they got rid of term limits for leaders, or what we call presidents. So now the Chinese leader can actually serve his term forever, the rest of his life. What that means is the reason they did that is because the vision they have for the country, they don't want that vision to change, and they want that vision to remain with one person, and they want that one person to carry that country through to that vision. For a long time, the U.S. has ridiculed China. We've lambasted them, we've clowned them, we talked down on them almost as they were stupid people, and the Chinese just kept quiet. They just kept quiet, and they just kept developing. And in fact, they've developed in a way to where we actually assisted in some ways. A lot of Chinese students would come here for education and take it back to China, take the technology back to China, the IT technology, So we did it to ourselves in a sense. America has, in some ways, been an arrogant country. We've been a country where we do a lot of talk. We do a lot of talk, and I think sometimes we do too much talking. Now, some would argue that's what democracy is. Democracy allows you to talk, allows you to have a voice. But I think when you're doing too much talking and not enough walking, you find yourself potentially running into a brick wall. And I think that's where we're at right now. China has forged new relationships around the world with continents of Africa, countries in Africa. They've forged relationships with some of the, folks even close to our borders in Southern America. The Chinese are not messing around. They're not messing around. I remember years ago when the Chinese had a country next to them called Tibet. China warned Tibet that it was going to come in and recapture that country and make that country a part of China. In 1959, China made a move. And in 1959, the leader of Tibet, known as the Dalai Lama, had to escape Tibet and go in asylum, seek asylum in India, where he has been since then, since 1959. China occupied the space, and they have made sure the culture is aligned with their ideology. So it basically crushed one culture, crushed one country's culture, and absorbed it into their own and made them follow suit. China, for a long time, has been a part of our lives, whether we know it or not. Case in point, go look around your house right now and pick up about 10 items in your house. 10 items, anything. It could be a shoes, it could be a spoon, bowl, it could be the TV, 10 items in the house. Look at who made those items. I guarantee you at least one of those items came from China. I want to say more came from China, but I'm giving us the benefit of the doubt. At least one of those items came from China. And we remember COVID. We will always remember COVID and the lives lost and the devastation it left. And we blame China for the COVID, for releasing this stuff in some laboratory near some wet market. We call China ruthless for releasing this vaccine, this COVID vaccine, and we slam China, and the U.S. made the world point fingers at China. But then guess what? China was the only one that could save the world. China was the only one producing masks. China was producing ventilators. China was producing all the medical equipment needed for the respiratory care for patients who were struggling with this COVID. So in a sense, they say China started it. To me, it looks like China controlled it. If that's the case, they control the outcome. That's power. That's something we need to pay attention to. During COVID, it was a mess. You couldn't find masks anywhere. The U.S. had to end up damn near begging China. All countries end up begging China to please provide masks to them, because China had a whole bunch of masks. If you don't know, Asian nations, this mask, wearing masks are nothing new. They've worn masks for many years. They're very particular about the spread of germs and diseases. So when you go to places like Japan, which I spent 10 years in Japan, it's not uncommon to see, Japanese folks walking around with masks, especially if they know they have an illness or a cold or something like that. They're very cognizant of their responsibility not to spread that bacteria to other people. We should pay attention to China, because China has also made sure that we, as a country and as a world, know that they are the leaders in AI right now. For some in America, people are looking to folks like Apple and some of these other folks, Google, some of these other folks, as the all-in thing. They think that's the big AI thing right now. China's been keeping quiet. China has some powerful AI tools and some AI products that I think will blow the human mind when it all comes out. So is China trying to shape the future of the world? We don't know. But what we do know right now is they are leading in a lot of areas. And many of those areas, Americans thought they were leading in. Has Americans been asleep on China's evolution? Have Americans not been paying attention to what's going on with China and their influence around the world? It is my hope that this recent parade opens some eyes and shows not only the U.S. but the rest of the world that China means business when it says it wants to be the leader in the world. And oh, by the way, China also has by its side other powerful leaders in the world and powerful countries: Russia, Iran, North Korea. These folks have always had frosty and cold relationships with the U.S., but not with China. China says they're okay with having a relationship with anyone that just respects them. As long as they're mutual respect, they can have a relationship. China is so embedded in the continent of Africa right now. It's unbelievable. People are not paying attention. A lot of deals being made. China agreed to export, tons and tons and tons of grain and things like that to the African continent. And in exchange, the African continent, some of those countries, agreed to export very precious minerals and substances needed for AI and for technology. So you better believe China does not have a problem with forging relationships. And they're loaning out money. China's loaning out money to a lot of countries who are suffering financially. And some of that is because of what the U.S. did to some of these countries. But China's going in and backfilling and telling these countries, hey, we'll give you this huge loan with the low interest rate, sometimes with no interest rate. All China wants them to do is be good trading partners with them. China's just saying, hey, if we have products to sell, we want you to be the first to buy them. Those are some hell of a deals made between countries. We need to be paying attention to what's going on with China. As a former military member, 22-year Air Force veteran who has been around a lot of military technology, a lot of military hardware, I can tell you what was on display at the recent massive military parade causes me concern. Some of the things I've seen, I've heard about, the laser weapons, the robotic dogs, hypersonic missiles, all on full display at this massive, massive military parade. And oh, by the way, not only were there, high technical weaponry rolling through the streets, if you look up in the sky, they had stuff that looked like it could stand toe to toe with ours. Fighter jets, radar aircraft. My goodness. They brought out everything. Or did they? Did they? Again, China doesn't talk a lot. They just walk. They walk the walk. We in America have been asleep for a long time. Gone are the days of what we call the Chinamen back then. I don't mean to be racist when I say that, but that's kind of what they referred to, the Chinamen back then. The folks who were building railroads, while they had black people enslaved, they literally also had Chinese enslaved in a sense. But Chinese had more rights. Chinese could go and come as they please. They can go back to China. They can go and come as they please. Not African Americans. They could not leave the plantations. But we were all treated like crap. Slaves were not given wages. Chinese were given wages, but they were meager wages. But they didn't care. Because from where they came from, it was very poor at the time, many years ago. And what they saw in America is opportunity, just like any other immigrant would see. So China made sure to capitalize on those opportunities. And over the years, the Chinese population just grew and grew and grew in America. And we just left China alone as long as Chinese left us alone. Not knowing all along that the Chinese government was at play. Keep in mind, these are still Chinese citizens. These citizens, some work for the Chinese government. They would take information and get it, technology, whatever, IT, medical science, and they would take that information and send it back to China. In fact, China is such an authoritarian nation that several years ago there was an investigation launched because they found out that China actually had police stations in America. They had police stations in Chinese communities just to make sure those Chinese citizens abided by the Chinese ideology. Right under our noses. I have nothing against the Chinese. In fact, surprisingly so, I kind of idolize some aspect of the way they've been doing business. Quietly, but with force. China eventually is going to make a play on Taiwan. China is eventually going to try to recapture Taiwan. Now, Taiwan used to be a part of China way back in the day where they broke apart and, there was some sort of small level revolution. And Taiwan became its own country, supported by the U.S. and other allies. But China says, hell no. China says Taiwan has always belonged to them, and China wants it back. Just like China went and recovered Tibet and made that leader flee, China's not messing around with Taiwan. I would not be surprised if they try to make a play on Taiwan, irregardless of the military superpowers and the military hardware and the things we say we're going to do to defend Taiwan. I don't think China gives a damn. The military hardware I saw on display the other day lets me know China doesn't give a damn. And I haven't even begun to talk about the look on the Chinese leader's face. You go back and look at some of those news clips and some of the coverage from that. Just look at his face. He's riding in a vehicle with 4 microphones, riding through his military, giving commands and giving orders, and they're shouting him back. But the look on his face is one of relaxation and total peace. Like he is not concerned with anything because the ideology is heading in the course they want it to head in. The look on his face, it looked like he was not worried about a damn thing. And he looks to his left and he sees Putin. Looks to his right, he sees Kim Jong-un. I don't think he is worried about anything. But we should be. America, wake up. China's here. They've always been here. Y'all take care.